Hello, we're John and Elizabeth. We're sat on board Corrick on a mooring buoy just off Gigha, which must be one of the most popular places that we've been to.
And really lovely.
It's absolutely topped up.
Yeah.
And been here for a couple of days. It's been so nice. Spent a day on the beach. This marks the end of our time in Scotland, I think.
Yeah, it's quite sad.
Yeah. I hope you enjoy this video.
Thank you.
So we're in Gigha. It seems like ages ago. There's been a lot of
Ground we've covered.
ground covered since we were in Tobermory.
Yeah, time is just whizzing by.
Yeah, Tobermory, down through past Oban again, past Loch Don into Loch Craignish. A couple of days there because the weather was a bit rubbish. Then down to Tayvallich, Loch Sween.
That was fabulous.
Really nice. A couple of little detours on the way, which was nice. Then over to Jura. And again, all of these places have an enormously different feel to them. Then Islay.
Islay, Port Ellen.
Port Ellen, couple of days. The obligatory whisky tour.
We were thinking from Port Ellen to go straight across to Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
But everybody we met said you need to go to Gigha, and I'm so glad that we've done that.
Yeah. So it's sunset, a very lovely one too, and we're going to get up at a reasonable time tomorrow and strike for County Antrim.
Yeah.
We had been recommended by a number of people to go to Loch Don, very beautiful and full of wildlife, and it's not very far away from Oban at all, just across the Firth of Lorn. But we did find ourselves doing something that we wouldn't normally do, and that was basically locking ourselves in with the tide. If you look at the chart here, very shallow at the entrance and very shallow further up. And that meant we could get in, but we couldn't always get out.
The exit from Loch Don was a good opportunity to practice navigating using the echo sounder more than anything else. Now, with GPS and people phones and plotters, we tend not to look at the depth maybe as much as we should. Certainly, it's sort of been relegated, but the reality is that some things are pretty constant, and the echo sounder, I've never known one to fail, and the shape of the bottom pretty much always stays the same. GPS, on the other hand, GPS doesn't fail as such, but I have had plotters lock up, and I have had situations where the GPS on my phone, the location services, hasn't been quite there, or you're on the wrong page, or something like that. So it is possible, and a good thing to do every now and again, which is to use a contour line and follow that out. And you basically work out which contour line you want to follow, compensate for the depth, put yourself on that line from a known direction, and then follow it. And you know that you go one way, it'll get shallower, and go the other way, it'll get deeper, and you follow that line all the way out. And in Loch Don, where there wasn't much in the way of transits or visual references, there was quite a large expanse of water, but not much depth. The channel was really quite narrow, and we wandered along the contour, and we didn't wander along at the deepest point. We wandered along at just ever so slightly to one side, so that we had a little bit of margin for error. Let me just show you what I mean.
As you can see from the southeast corner of this, the depth is 0, and therefore we wanted about 2.5 meters before we went out. We knew we were anchored in 6.5, so I waited until the echo sounder said that. I was working both on the calculations and the actual what I could see. But the depth at the entrance is a little bit more. Controlling depth is described as 1.5 meters. So in theory, we had 4, which was loads. it's not immediately obvious, but there's no landmarks ashore to give you a good idea where you are here, and therefore I wanted to follow the contour. So what I did was I put myself over the 1 metre line, had my height of tide, and that meant that I had a little bit of extra room to go to starboard if I needed it, and that following one contour just in is a very, very handy technique. The forecast for the weekend was reasonably heavy winds from the south and the southwest, and we wondered whether it would be good fun to head up to Tobermory again. We enjoyed Tobermory, so we set off and headed up the Sound of Mull. A really very, very lovely sail, a few people out, but we wanted to get to Tobermory, and we took the inner route inside Calf Sound. Again, the Antares charts were really, really useful here, and we came in through this little patch of water here. As you can see, it's quite a narrow little gap, and with the wind blowing from the south, it was ever so slightly bumpy, but we had enough clearance, and it's marked with a couple of little poles. There's the port hand one there, and you can just see the starboard hand one as we come through. What it did mean was we got through that gap a little bit sooner than somebody else, and as we arrived in Tobermory, I think we got the last alongside berth, which made Elizabeth very happy. Tobermory was characteristically busy, with lots of toll ships in and out, lots of training boats. But we managed to go for a walk, saw a lovely waterfall, and as we were coming back in, we saw people anchoring at Aros Bay. Watching these guys was quite interesting because the bowman there very clearly has a good system for signalling stuff to the helm. But this was our view as we wandered back into Tobermory itself. A couple of toll ships alongside, as I say, all very pleasant. We've left Tobermory. Weather forecast is for a reasonably strong breeze from the west, although we're not quite seeing that at the moment. Interesting little departure from there, and we are making our way south. We've got quite a long trip ahead of us today, coming north to get Tobermory to take advantage of the southerly breeze. Has added us a little penalty, but that's okay. But we are head sail only, almost running down Sound of Mull, sometimes 4 knots, sometimes 6 knots. It's very, very, very fluky, and
as a Sunday treat.
As a Sunday treat, exactly as Elizabeth says.
It's going to be eggs in a minute, bacon, and tattle scones.
Excellent. Well, we got round the corner of Mull and past Loch Don and Loch Spelv, and it was a little bit light, and I was slightly anxious that we weren't going to have enough breeze to get on, but as we cleared the lee of Mull, it piped up quite a bit, and we had a rip-roaring broad reach all the way down through the Sound of Lewing. I'm sorry that there's a bit of spray on the camera here, but it was very lovely reaching down there, and we were doing, in relatively flat seas, we were doing 7 knots. It was great fun, and a lot of boats heading north as we were punching a little bit of tide as we headed in towards Loch Craignish. But it was a long day, but it was a really very good sail indeed. Both of us enjoyed it greatly. As we got in to the lee of Scarborough and Jura, we saw this passage here to the west called Grey Dogs, which the Antares chart says just don't do, and then later on Corrib Wrekin, which I've been through, but this was not the right time to do it with the wind blowing from the west and the ebb tide. And then we came round through Doris Moor, and it looks fairly benign here, and to be honest it was, but I think what is worth showing is just how choppy it is here, and then in just a few minutes it goes absolutely silky smooth. Yeah, quite remarkable, and much more wind, and going in the other direction it might be an unpleasant surprise.
Well done, Corrib.
Well, we're having something of a non-sailing day today. you can probably tell from the picture behind me that it's a grey and miserable day. We picked up a very lovely anchorage last night and gorgeous sunset, but the sunset was made more gorgeous by the very obvious front that was coming through, which then caused the wind to swing round, and we've had everything from very nearly east to very nearly west, which made choosing the anchorage a little bit more tricky. But we got in and we're sitting here, and it's forecast just now to be about 25 knots of breeze, which is probably one of the larger winds we've been sat at anchor in. So everything seems to be being handling quite nicely. We're staying very nicely inside our swinging circle. The anchor is well bedded in. Optimistically, it'll start to drop as we go through this evening, because and tomorrow, ideally, a new day.
As we headed south, we came into Loch Sween. Castle Sween sits on the edge, a very popular holiday sort of place. And as we headed further up, we headed towards Tobermory, and this is a little seems to be quite a bit of a holiday town, but as you come up through the loch, the bay opens and then you start to see the whole of the little village. Very nice restaurant there, a couple of mooring buoys. We managed to pick one up, which was very pleasant, and sat there overnight. But it's quite fun as you head north, and then all of a sudden this village just appears around the corner. A couple of nice anchorages that we looked at the following day. We just didn't have time to spend any time there, but it looked like a nice place to go. Really liked Loch Sween. On the other side of the land, there's Carseg Bay and Carseg Island, and we had a look at both of those on the way down. But as I say, Tobermory itself, very pretty, mooring buoy very helpful, and overnight it was as still as a still thing. We spent a very restful night there. We then had a very mellow day's sail over towards Gigha, coming out here of Loch Sween, past a couple of lighthouses and into Craig House itself, and this is us on a mooring buoy just underneath the paps of Gigha.
It's still fairly early in the morning, and we left Craig House very early, mostly because we were kept awake most of the night by the howling wind, which actually was much noisier in our forward cabin than it really was in reality. We should have slept in the saloon last night, but we got up pretty early, expecting between 20 and 30 knots of breeze, and there was definitely 22, 24 in the anchorage, but we then headed almost due south with the wind right on the quarter, and we absolutely romped along. A bit of tide underneath us as well, so we were doing between 7 and 8 knots over the ground. So this journey has disappeared in all regards. We're now in the lee of Islay, and I think I'm going to have to tack round Texas. So I've put a reef in the main just to just make sure we're not overpowered as we go through there. But so far it's been a really, really nice sail.
The very last bit of the trip into Islay, we were seeing about 25 or 30 knots of breeze across the deck, and we had 2 reefs in the main and the number 2 Jenny, so we were a bit unbalanced. But this is the view from Bowmore on Loch Indal, quite windy. But we took the opportunity to do a distillery tour, long awaited, so we visited Lagavulin. Very lovely tour indeed, absolutely spectacular setting as well. It was good.
We are on our way from Port Ellen in Islay to Gigha, and we're very fortunate that we have a northerly breeze, 10-12 knots, so we're romping along at 6 knots through the water, 5 over the ground. We've got a bit of a northerly stream that's against us at the moment. Well, it's not lifting us up towards Gigha, it's pushing us away. But the wind has just very gently started to back, so we're just a degree or two off the ley line. It's going really well. Port Ellen was rather lovely.
Yeah, we managed to fit in a distillery tour, which was excellent.
Really excellent. It was very good indeed.
But the whisky was eye-wateringly expensive.
Yes, I've never spent £2,000 on a bottle of whisky. I don't think I'm going to start.
But apparently, talking to the guy that owns the little whisky shop there, saying that there's quite a few tourists that do. Canadians, Americans, Japanese.
Oh, blimey. Lucky them.
Yeah. I wish I had that amount of money to spend.
Yeah, so we're 9 miles from Gigha, or the southern tip of Gigha. So we're about 3 hours from being alongside, and we should have dinner booked at the Boathouse restaurant, which I'm very much looking forward to. A number of people have recommended it.
And the gardens.
And the gardens.
So this is our...
maybe last stop in Scotland. And at the moment, down south, Storm Anthony is battering the coast of Wales and the Bristol Channel, so I'm afraid to say I'm really rather not pleased that our 12 knots of northerly breeze is helping us out a lot.
Here we are, romping along.
Yep.
Doing about 7 knots, which
I think I might be reading a little bit high.
You never know. And we are approaching.
We've been nicely lifted, very nicely.
Well, the lift continued, and as we approached Gigha, we were able to make it in on the very narrow inner passageway between the main island and a little island off to the southwest. But as we got into the lee of the land, the sea flattened out, and we just stormed straight up into the anchorage. It was very lovely indeed. Gigha is a really very pretty place. So this is the Boathouse restaurant where we had dinner, and we managed to spend a day on the beach, out of the wind, in the sunshine. We even managed to get a swim.
Really do hope that's been useful and interesting, and if you're thinking of cruising Scotland, really can't recommend it highly enough. On to the next stage.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.